Hi, how are you today? It's Patty here. I'm exhausted. I've I've had a long day. I'm wasted, physically. I am so tired. I'm completely stripped down. My hair, I'm sweaty. We are in the 30s, upper 30s. So in Canada, that's pretty hot, especially when you're a cool weather girl. But I mean, we're 34 Celsius, which I believe might be, I don't know, 90 something. I'll have to figure it out. But, that in combination, the day was long, it was grueling, my feet hurt. I followed up on a commitment that I had made and for an event, and I spent the entire day running my feet off and being a customer oriented type of an individual. And we had these plutocrats, I like to call them, but they're corporate big shots, right? That were at this event, and it came around to my side of, my particular event. Of course, they were um, showcasing, right? Because they were getting the accolades or the press. They were getting the attention was basically on them. So they were showcasing and really trying to ham it up and make it look like, well, this is all about us. And it came around to me, and this attitude with some of these corporate heads where they look at you like you are nobody, you know? They treat you like, I'm a CEO of such and such and such and such. Well, you know what? It pissed me off. I saw how they treated these other people who are also giving of and their time and their energy, and we busted our butts off today. And I thought, yeah, we did it to make you look good. And this flooded back memories for me of when I was in the corporate field. Now, we'll take it back. Um, as a young woman, I really loved art. I was everything art. Now, I have a lot of interests. I was born an information junkie, but I always loved all things art. Oh, it was everything to me. And my parents didn't really even discourage it much. I mean, they even probably assumed that that would be the role I would be in most of my life. And only they probably thought that it would be commercial art, but it was highly competitive. And, you had to be almost a specialist in a particular area in order to even make it. Or if you're going to be a fine artist, such as Trisha Romance and I can name off Thomas Kincaid. Unless you got some kind of a huge corporate contract with Disney or you just happen to hit it. To be marketable, you were constantly flagging it. Now, in hindsight, I would have maybe done things differently. But what we're talking about right now is I chose a shadow career. And what is a shadow career? A shadow career is you kind of take a creative outlet and find a career. So for me, being very visual, being very mechanically inclined, I loved architecture. I worked with my father in construction for many years. He used to draft up the buildings and what they would look like after he was done with them. And he sold a lot of work that way. He would go to various businesses and he would show them what the building looked like now and what it would look like when he was done with it. And I used to sit beside him on his drafting board and be absolutely amazed that he could make something so beautiful with lines. And so my heart decided I was going to be an architect. So when I went back to be educated in the field, I worked for a while in construction, and that sort of thing. And I ended up going into college and to focus on either design. I wanted to get on the design aspect of it. Most people said, oh, go for the whole thing, and let the others work for you. But I was really design oriented. I'm the type of person that likes to get my hands in there. And you know what? I never really even thought that there was a ceiling. So I decided that I was going to be on the technologist level, on a designer level, so that I could really, really be in the heart of things, the creative aspect, the creative, juicy. And while I was going there, in your first year, you kind of take a little bit of every one of the fields. So you take a little bit of civil engineering, you take architectural or construction, and then you take mechanical. And there was a little bit of, electrical. But electrical, that was it was kind of a shadowy field at that time because you either went all the way for engineer or that was it. There really wasn't a place for technicians or technologists. So in that first year, I was really encouraged by my mentors, my teachers, that I was very mechanically inclined. I was actually going to go through metallurgy, and science was another field. But anyway, I chose mechanical, and because that's where the money was at the time. And as much as I really wanted the architectural, I heeded that advice, and I decided to go into the mechanical field. And it really is a right brain function as well, but I was a middle brainer because I was able to grasp the concepts. I was able to follow a sequence of events necessary to come to, like for formulas and things like that, necessary for calculating and for piping and instrumentation, P&IDs and welding and all of that good stuff. So I worked, and so when I first got into the field, I had worked various contract jobs. But when I first got into the field, I was hired at this international design. They did shell and tube, these huge vessels for manufacturing plants, whether it be chemical, but they use these huge shell and tube vessels with multiple tubes that ran through heat exchangers. Where I'm getting all excited just thinking about it again, but it was a very prominent international company. So I was hired on. I'm very excited. It was my first real design for a corporate position. I was the only female. Okay, when I was hired on, I was the only female that they'd ever hired, and from what I've heard, I was the last. So I don't know if I ruined it for the rest or not, but but one thing I noticed when I was there was at the same time that I was hired, there was an African American hired the same time. There was an Asian man, and there was a Latino. And I went, aha. Okay, they're trying to fill the quota, right? They probably got some kind of a bonus. And from that moment on, I would be sitting there working with engineers and designers on shell and tube. We actually even had a contract for a major airline for jet exhaust coolers, and I was just in heaven, right in the thick of the design process. And the boss, the superintendent of our department, would call out of his door and go, Patriska, you come in here for a minute. That was our boss, right? He was Russian. So I would go in and he'd say, I need to have some filing done. You go do some filing. And every opportunity that he had, he would make a comment to me. You should be at home having babies. A woman like you got good figure. You should be at home having babies. You know what you say? Babies and barefoot. I'm not kidding you. This went on for quite a while, a long time, and I bared it. And I put up with it, and I persevered because I really, really wanted this to work. It was my first real design job because I had done little bits and pieces. There was a man there that I love to this day. A mechanical engineer who took me under his wing, and he actually left the company to start his own, and actually tried to entice me, but it was out of town, and it was too far away for me. And then I found out that I was pregnant. So I left it for a long time before I told him that I was pregnant, because I knew exactly what my boss would do. He would put me in a menial job somewhere, just out of spite. And finally, it got to the point where I started to show, and I had to tell him that I was pregnant, and give the details. And no word of a lie, he took me out of my. At that point, I'd worked my way up to an intermediate design, right? Intermediate design draftsman, working on just some great, great projects, learning just some wonderful information. And he took me out of that and he put me in the blueprint room to just do copies all day. Well, I persevered. That was the last of it. I wrote my resignation. I wrote it and I sent it to the CEO, and I told them exactly what I had been persevering for that last year. And I said my goodbyes and that they would not be getting any recommendations from me. Pretty bold. But you know what? I actually got a call and they did try to remediate the situation. But the situation wasn't going to change as long as this individual had this attitude, right? So I quit and I moved on. Since then I'd worked, from that point I'd worked for various engineering companies, and then I got my full-time career working for a very major chemical manufacturing company in instrument and electrical. The instrumentation aspect of it, I still could do my mechanical. But it was at that time in the 80s when the computer and the CAD was just starting to get out. And I was really thriving. I was at this one plant site where things were great. I had some wonderful mentors. And then a position came up for full-time salary employee. Well, you know what? At that time, I was also a single mom. So I was looking for something secure. So I applied for the position. I got it. Well, my third day on the job, I was in a meeting with other instrument electrical designers, and the lead instrument electrical designer looked at me and he said, "So, did you come over here to take my job? Well, you got another thing coming. We don't like women in our field, and, get used to it." That was my introduction to my full-time. So let me tell you about perseverance, right? I did. I persevered for 10 years working for that man. He sabotaged me. He did everything he could to keep me in a position where I couldn't grow. But the beauty of it was I had some individuals in that department that knew of my work, that believed in me, and knew of the situation that it was in. He masked it pretty good, okay? And then when everything started going well, we got bought out by a private investor, and I was downsized, right? So I know about perseverance. I know how hard it is to deal with discrimination. My father, working in construction with him, he may not have been a greatest father, but I'll tell you, he was the greatest employer I ever had. Talk about equal opportunity. He didn't segregate. He didn't discriminate. If you could do the job, then you got paid to do the job. And they never discouraged me. They never told me that, oh, that field you're going to go into is a man's job. But see, the other thing too, in defense of some engineers, even though there's no excuse for that kind of behavior, engineering is a left brain position. It is kind of a sequential. So it's always going to be a little bit of an old boy network, okay? But there's a lot of the younger generation that's coming up now that has a better attitude. But what used to keep me going through was, because I'm of that era, I remembered Winston Churchill used to have this speech. And I remember even my grandfather, because he was British, and he actually fought in the war at the time of Winston Churchill. So words from Winston Churchill is what kept these guys that were in the trenches, going forward and persevering and knowing that this war will end and victory will be for all. And he used to say, when he made that entire address, never, never, never give up. Don't ever, ever, friends, throw in the towel on your goals and your dreams. And what my focus is now is, you know what? I was pissed after today. I was upset, but I am going to persevere. I'm going to persevere in my endeavors here with my online marketing. Sure, I have some tough days, but you know what? Mostly they're great. But I'm going to persevere, and I'm going to be a success just to spite them, if anything. I had dreams and goals, but I am persevering. You know, I'm not even going to resign myself to fears or but see, the thing is every great victory is developed out of a substance called faith, right? Faith in yourself, faith in your abilities. You know, I've earned my numbers, and I've earned my place here in the marketing world as well. And so have you. So if you'd like to see how I've built myself in a position of freedom, you know, put your best email in or click the link below and let's talk. Let's get you to freedom too. Well, I'm sorry I took up a lot of your time, but if you listen this far, you're a persevere. You're a perseverer. All the best to you today, and make it count.